Welcome to Navigating the Customer Experience. Want to improve your organization's customer service? Looking for insider tips to knock your customer socks off? Then you're in the right place. Here's your host, Yannick Grant.
Welcome to Navigating the Customer Experience. On today's episode, our guest is Daniel Ruby. Daniel is a VP of Marketing at Noble9. Ruby is a dynamic marketing executive with a focus on B2B marketing and has significant experience building teams and driving successful data-driven programs for a range of startups and mid-sized organizations. As the director of online marketing for Localytics, Ruby was the first marketing hire and scaled his team to a full-fledged marketing department with domain specialists focused on mobile apps. Ruby also has a background in journalism and spent several years guest lecturing marketing courses at Bentley University, bringing this dynamic skill set to his current role at Noble9. Ruby holds a BA in broadcast journalism from the University of Missouri, Columbia, and an MBA in international business from Brandeis University. So without further delay, sit back, plug your earphones in, and let's jump right into this conversation with Daniel. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I appreciate the time this afternoon.
All right. Now, Daniel, could you share with our listeners, we always like to start off by asking our guests if they could share with us a little bit about their journey, how you got from where you were to where you are today.
Yeah, so I was a journalist for a while and kind of realized that there was not much of a market for it. So I kind of went and got an MBA to get a job and kind of fell backwards into marketing as it is. And, over the years, I've been with more than 10, mostly tech startups, driving marketing, driving the customer experience in terms of, from the moment that they're introduced to us as a brand until the moment that they no longer want to be or need to be working with us. I find a lot of joy in trying to make that experience pleasant, lack of a better term. It's, I'm self-taught with most of the marketing stuff that I do. And I've kind of, over the course of the years, I've become very arrogantly convinced about a few core tenets of really communicating to customers and communicating to potential customers that have served me well. And it kind of always comes back to giving value at every step of the journey.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing. Now, could you share with our listeners what is Noble9 and what exactly are you providing? What service are you providing? How are you adding value to your customers' lives using this platform?
Sure. So Noble9 is basically a platform for software reliability. So if we think about how somebody engages with a digital product or even an in-person product with a digital back end to it, we are the premier and kind of really only well-established provider of what's called service level objectives, or SLOs. And an SLO is basically taking all of the different data points that make up your product, be it from the software, from the infrastructure, from third-party microservices, et cetera, and rolls it up and actually gives a customer-centric view into, how reliable is our product. And the reason that we do this is because most reliability historically has been around, is the product up? Is it up? Is it down? But, anybody who's ever used a mobile app or a digital product or even, like a scan to pay service at a cafe knows that it's not just, is it up? It's, is it working? Or is everything within it doing what it's supposed to do. So I know marketers like myself have taken the word holistic and kind of beaten it to death, but we do provide we do provide a holistic customer-centric view of what is the customer experience like when actually using your product.
Okay. So Noble 9 is helping the application to maintain its reliability and have as little or no downtime as possible while the customer is interacting with it, correct?
Correct. And kind of beyond downtime, it's does it load fast enough? Do all of the different uh, features load fast enough? Is there anything blocking my ability as a customer to buy from you or to use your service or whatever you're trying to do?
Mm-hmm.
So that's effectively what we do.
Okay. Could you give us an example, like a use case of an application? You can choose any
Oh,
industry and kind of just give us an idea of what that looks like so the audience can get a more practical
yeah.
view.
Yeah, it's a little engineering-y. Um, and I'm a marketer, so I feel like I'm not necessarily smart enough to completely understand the engineering speak of it, but if you think about like an e-commerce app, if you open up the app and it loads in traditional reliability, that's reliable. But so let's say your path in using an e-commerce app is I'm going to load the app, I'm going to search for the product that I want to buy, I'm going to add it to my cart, I'm going to go to my cart, I'm going to check out. And maybe there's a login to my account somewhere in the way. Um, with SLOs, what you can do is you can have all of the different steps of that path viewed as part of this overarching experience with the app. So if you go to add something to your cart and the app sits there and hangs, that's not good reliability. If you go to the cart itself and for whatever reason you go to pay and like the app's connection to PayPal for whatever reason isn't working and you get this message back that says, hey, we can't complete your payment, try another, try a credit card or something. That's a bad experience, and that's the kind of reliability breakdown that leads people to quit using a product. So, we make sure that strategically all of the things that make up that path, you'll have a server dedicated to your shopping cart. You'll have a microservice that is dedicated to completing a purchase. We make sure that all of that you've got visibility into, how the experience is for the end user, not just, some third party service that tries to connect and says, yes, it can connect, no, it can't connect. It's the whole experience of a digital product. And we make it easy to understand.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing.
Sure.
Now, at the beginning, you mentioned that it's based on your SLOs or service level objectives, right? I
Correct.
just wanted to know if you could distinguish or differentiate for our listeners what's the difference between an SLO and an SLA?
Okay. Yeah. Great question. An SLA is typically an agreement that you have with your users. You say you'll be able to use my product or my service XX% of the time. Um, and that's more of a contractual conversation than it is, a reliability conversation. When you start actually building it, in order to make sure that, you're achieving this SLA that you've agreed upon with your clients, you've got to make sure that, um, all of these different elements of their experience are operating at a certain efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
So I hate to overcomplicate things, but there's actually a step in between called an SLI, a service level indicator.
Hmm.
And so a service level indicator is things like, I want my website to load in less than 100 milliseconds. That's a service level indicator.
Mm-hmm.
And, the SLI is effectively, a consistent goal. But then what you do with SLOs is you take that a little bit further and you say, so an SLO operates within what's called an error budget. And you get a certain number of errors per month, per week, however you want to set it up. And an error is when you don't meet that SLI. And you say, I know that it's maybe not impossible, but either improbable or just extremely expensive to make my website load in less than 100 seconds every single time. So what an SLO does is it says, okay, I I expect to meet this SLI, you know, however much, however often I have decided is actually impactful on the customer experience. And whenever I don't, you get an error. And at that point, you're like, okay, it's an error, but an error is not an outage. So I don't know if I'm explaining this really well. I'm in
That's
my head a
okay.
little bit. But basically, you've got kind of if you look at an SLO graph, it's going to be going down and to the right. And that is your budget. You say, okay, we can do, I expect this part of my service to meet my SLI, 95% of the time. And then you see the little graph going down, which every time it doesn't meet that, it throws an error.
Mm-hmm.
And a certain amount of errors, I mean, it's just part of digital product development is understanding that you have to accept some errors. 100% perfection, it's impossible.
Does not
So
exist.
yeah, it does not exist. And a lot of people think about reliability in the number of nines. My product is available 99.99% of the time. That would be called four nines. Um, Adding a nine, every nine that you add to that number basically increases your IT costs by an order of magnitude. So at a certain point, you got to understand with SLOs are really the ideal way to do it. At what point does this actually impact my customers?
Mm-hmm.
At what point does this actually impact my users? It allows you to be strategic and it allows you to see things when they begin. So, you mentioned outages earlier, I think. An outage, your whole product crashes. It's unavailable to anybody. Those don't happen in a vacuum. There's something that causes them. And if you've got an SLO or a set of SLOs really displaying the health of your service, the health of your product, you're suddenly going to see a bunch of errors coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And, you may or may not have enough forewarning to say, oh crap, we're about to have an outage. Well, this server in my cloud provider is having massive latency issues. It looks like the server's about to crash, and that's going to take everything down. You can have a little bit more of a runway to try and identify the actual issue behind a potential outage. And that's where you strategically define how many errors can I tolerate in a month? And then you basically have a real-time view of at all times, is my product, is my service running the way I expect it to? And the way I expect it to is from the perspective of the customer. Are my customers able to do what they expect to be able to do when they launch my app or when they, they use my product.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing. Now, Daniel, could you share with us what's the one online resource, tool, website, or app that you absolutely can't live without in your business?
Me personally, it's HubSpot.
Mm-hmm.
I have been, I spent a few years as a HubSpot consultant, a third-party consultant for HubSpot integrations, and I could say, a marketing automation platform. Um, but I got a fanboy a little bit about HubSpot because it takes everything that used to be complicated about sales and marketing and customer support and customer experience and kind of rolls it up. You got your CRM, you've got your automation platform, you've got your email platform. And I've actually taken to feeding my HubSpot metrics into Noble 9 SLO lately so that I can, because there's so much rich data within HubSpot. And, I've been running little things like we'll change a script for our biz dev team, and then we'll just run a metric on calls connected to calls um, having a success, either a demo or a follow-up request. And I can, HubSpot's got such great data, and then I can turn that into an SLO where I can say, okay, you know, I expect the submission rate on my forms to be X%. I expect the completion rate of, our inside sales calls to be X% over, you know, 80% of the time. And I can run that in an SLO and I can see that, like, if I change something, but simple little things, if I change the color of the submit button on a form, I can see in real time, what the view to submission rate is that's changing. And I can act on that. I can put a little note in the SLO at that timestamp and say, hey, I changed the color of this button, and see, you know, how that's making an impact. Or, if I go back and say it, if I look in HubSpot and see, oh crap, my submission rate has been terrible for the past, 36 hours. What's happened? And I can go into my SLO and say, oh, it's like a little note here. I changed something in the UX. I changed something, color-wise. I added a question. I removed a question, and you can see direct historical cause for that for that. But going back to HubSpot in general, I really respect HubSpot's approach to, they call it the flywheel, which is all about delighting customers and delighting prospects. And they really do a great job of giving you the tools to actually give value in your marketing and sales and customer service processes. I don't know what I'd do without HubSpot right now. I'd probably try and hack something together with Salesforce and Marketo and be more complicated and less easy to get adoption internally. But luckily, I don't need to.
Great. All right. So we'll have the link to the HubSpot platform in the show notes of this episode for those of our listeners that may want to tap into that awesome resource. Now, our listeners would have tapped into this episode, Daniel, and they're quite intrigued with your organization and you, and they'd like to follow you online. Where's the best place that they can find you online?
So the best place to find us is LinkedIn. Just search for Noble9, Nobl9 in LinkedIn. It's actually Noble9 Inc. is our page on LinkedIn. We're also on Twitter at Noble9 Inc. But really, LinkedIn is the best place to find us.
Okay, great. We'll have the links to those platforms. Now, before we wrap our episodes up, we always like to ask our guests, do you have a quote or a saying that during times of adversity or challenge, you'll tend to revert to this quote if for any reason you get derailed or you get off track?
Yeah. Um, Nothing is a failure unless you fail to learn from it. And that's something that, I've got a great team that I work with here at Noble Nine. And, some are early in their career, some have been working in marketing for several years. Um, some have advanced degrees, some don't. And so, I've been with Noble Nine since January. And one of the things that I wanted to do quickly was make sure that people were comfortable making mistakes and understanding that an action and its outcome is not the end of that process. If you don't learn from it, why it worked, why it didn't, then you've made a mistake. But failure is as important an element in driving success in any business scenario. I like making sure that people know that, and I like making sure that they feel comfortable, because without being comfortable with failure, how are you going to try anything revolutionary?
Mm-hmm. True. All right. Thank you so much for sharing, Danielle. Now, we just like to thank you so much for hopping on this podcast and sharing all of the great insights about Noble Nine, the wonderful work that your team is doing as it relates to ensuring that customers are having a more seamless and frictionless experience across these platforms, and it increases the reliability. And we really appreciate some of the great nuggets that you shared with us as it relates to what is a service level objective versus a service level agreement and a service level indicator. Great
Yeah.
information to learn, to understand the whole process, because in order to navigate the customer experience, there's really a lot that you have to take into account to ensure that the customer walks away feeling like, yeah, that was fun, it was easy, it wasn't hard, and I was able to do it really quickly. So thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Just want to remind our listeners you can follow us on X at Navigating CX, and feel free to join our private Facebook group, Navigating the Customer Experience Community. Until next time, I'm your host, Yannick Grant. We also have a new book available on Amazon, The ABCs of a Fantastic Customer Experience. It's available in ebook and paperback. So if you want to increase revenue in your organization, build a stronger service culture, and create employees or develop employees who are really mastering service delivery in your business, you need to grab a copy of this book. Until next time, I'm your host, Yannick Grant.